Good evening. Thanks for joining us on Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The top stories that we're tracking for you this evening. Indian equity markets end lower for the second day after a choppy session as geopolitical tensions keep traders on the edge. The Nifty slips below 26,200. Heavyweights like Reliance and Trent drag the markets lower. The Nifty Bank, though, ends in the green. Days after his dramatic extraction in a pre-dawn raid, deposed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro pleads not guilty to drug and weapon charges in a U.S. court, claims he was illegally captured and is a prisoner of war. Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, is sworn in as Venezuela's acting president. The Venezuelan government claims it is police who fired at drones that flew over Caracas without permission. Russia, China and a host of Latin American countries denounce Maduro's capture at the United Nations Security Council, call it a serious affront to the sovereignty of Venezuela. U.S. defends its action, says Maduro's capture is a law enforcement operation and not an act of war. Reliance Industries refutes a Bloomberg report which suggests that shipments of Russian oil were approaching the Jamnagar refinery. Says it has not received any cargo of Russian oil at its refinery in the past 3 weeks, adds it is also not expecting any Russian crude oil deliveries in January. India's central electricity regulator, under a scanner for the controversial order on market coupling for power exchanges, may consider withdrawal of the order after accusations of insider trading by CERC members come to light. APTEL to hear the matter again on the 9th of January. President Trump doubles down on his threat to annex Greenland, says the U.S. needs Denmark's autonomous territory from a security standpoint. Greenland calls his ambitions a fantasy, and Denmark says a move like this would be the end of NATO. European allies affirm that Greenland's future must be decided by its people. RBI issues amended directions on lending to related parties, aligning norms between banks and NBFCs. The rules are effective the 1st of April and widen the definition of related parties, strengthen disclosure and place greater accountability on boards. Equity investments remain outside the framework, but debt investments invite scrutiny. All of that and more coming up for you in just a bit, but let's start with the day's market action. The Large Street ending lower for the second day in a row, with the Nifty slipping below 26,200. Heavyweights like Reliance Industries, ITC and Trent were the big drags in our market today. Financials, though, outperformed the blue chips, with the Nifty Bank ending mildly higher. Flat close off its intraday highs, a very choppy session. That's the Nifty for you. The Sensex down about 400 points. The Nifty Bank just about closing in positive territory, and a flat close there for the mid-caps as well. Meanwhile, oil prices edging lower as markets wait the possibility of higher Venezuelan crude output. Traders speculate that President Maduro's removal from power in Venezuela could potentially lead to the U.S. easing its sanctions on Venezuelan oil. SBI researchers forecast that crude oil prices could fall to as low as $50 per barrel by June as fresh supplies hit the market, especially given softer global demand. And in the bullion market, gold prices remain steady after touching one-week highs. This after U.S. strikes in Venezuela added to the yellow metal safe haven appeal. Expectations of further rate cuts by the U.S. Federal Reserve also supporting prices. Silver also benefiting from the safe haven demand. That metal up about 3%. There has been some action in base metals as well. Copper prices soaring to record highs of $13,000 a metric ton as a strike at a mine in Chile increased fears of a supply shortage. So that's the metal action. Now, a lot of the action in the global financial and commodities market stems from the action around Venezuela. So that continues to be the big global story. Now, deposed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has pled not guilty to 4 charges of drug trafficking and terrorism when he was produced before a court in New York. This came less than 48 hours after he was extracted from Caracas. Maduro declared that he is still the president of Venezuela and that he was captured illegally and that he considers himself a prisoner of war. Meanwhile, Venezuela's Vice President and Oil Minister Delcy Rodriguez was formally sworn in as the country's interim president. Rodriguez said she was pained by what she called the kidnapping of Maduro and his wife.
Protesters gathered outside a New York federal court on Monday, where inside, toppled Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro stood before a U.S. judge to face charges that could put him behind bars for life. Through an interpreter, Maduro said, "I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. I am still president of my country," before being cut off. Maduro faces 4 U.S. federal criminal counts that include narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and possession of machine guns and destructive devices. His next court date is set for March 17th. His wife, Celia Flores, faces the same charges except for narco-terrorism. She also pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors allege that as president, Maduro directed cocaine trafficking routes, used the military to protect shipments, sheltered violent trafficking groups, and used presidential facilities to move drugs. He was first indicted in 2020 as part of a long-running narcotics trafficking case against Venezuelan officials and Colombian guerrillas. The 63-year-old has long denied the allegations, saying they're a mask to take Venezuela's rich oil reserves, which U.S. President Donald Trump has made no secret of wanting.
And several countries have voiced their objection to U.S. military operations in Venezuela. At an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, nations called for the immediate release of Venezuela's president and his wife from U.S. custody. Russia's representative to the UN called the intervention, and I quote, a return to lawlessness, urging the 15-member council to reject the methods of U.S. military foreign policy, saying there is no justification for the move. China's envoy echoed the charge, saying the U.S. had wantonly trampled upon Venezuela's sovereignty and violated the principle of sovereign equality. China demanded that the U.S. change its course, cease its bullying and coercive practices, and return to the path of political solutions through dialogue and negotiations. Meanwhile, Cuba also condemning the U.S. action against Venezuela, calling the military attack an imperialist and fascist aggression with objectives of domination. However, the U.S. envoy Mike Waltz defended the operation in Venezuela, justifying it as a surgical law enforcement operation, calling out the 15-member council for criticizing the targeting of Maduro, widely considered a dictator in the Western Hemisphere.
There is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco-trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people.
There is no and can be no justification for the crimes cynically perpetrated by the United States in Caracas. We firmly condemn the U.S. act of armed aggression against Venezuela in breach of all international legal norms. In connection with the confirmed reports about the presence of the abducted president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his spouse,
allowing such acts to go without an effective answer would amount to normalizing the replacement of law by might, while eroding the very foundations of the collective security system. Today, it is not only Venezuela's sovereignty that is at stake, the credibility of international law, the authority of this organization, and the validity of the principle that no state can set itself up as a judge, party, and executor of the world order are also at stake. Brazil does not believe that the solution to the situation in Venezuela lies in the creation of protectorates in the country, but rather in solutions that respect the self-determination of the Venezuelan people within the framework of its constitution. The events of January 3rd transcend the regional sphere. The attack on the sovereignty of any country, regardless of the direction of its government, affects the entire international community. This and other cases of armed intervention against the sovereignty of a country, its territorial integrity, or its institutions must be vehemently condemned.
We call on the U.S. to ensure the personal safety of President Maduro and his wife and to release them at once. We support the Council in fulfilling its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security, and we support all efforts by the UN Secretary-General, regional countries, and organizations that contribute to promoting dialogue and de-escalating the situation.
Well, the action there in the UN Security Council. Now, the big story back home. India's central electricity regulator is under the scanner for its controversial order on market coupling for power exchanges. The CERC said that it may consider withdrawal of the order This on the back of accusations of insider trading by CERC members that have come to light by the market regulator SEBI. Shares of IEX closed with gains of 11%. In fact, were higher through the course of the day, coming off a little bit at close, witnessing the biggest single-day gain since October of 2021. Ashmit is standing by now to explain what all of this means. Ashmit, take us through what transpired at Aptel, what the IEX Council had to say, and where we now head from here.
Well, bear in mind that one issue that has dominated the conversation in the previous hearing as well as this hearing have been assertions that are being made by the exchanges like the Indian Energy Exchange that this order is tainted, the coupling order is tainted on account of insider trading charges. They've cited SEBI reports to say that, in fact, the very author of the report is somebody who's been mentioned by SEBI to have, in fact, profited from, to have made illegal gains from through insider trading, through the crash that happened in the share prices of these exchanges. Now, that is something that even the Aptel today dwelled on. The Aptel said that this is something that even was brought to their attention, that there was a very theatrical process involved as far as passing of these regulations are concerned, that Aptel did not understand the reason behind the drama, and that if there is a foul play found, this is something that the Aptel will look at, will take necessary action on. But in response to all of this, we found that today the CERC councils were also present as a part of this hearing. The CERC council, their lawyer, submitting before Aptel that the CERC wanted this entire process to be fair, wanted this process to be transparent, wanted this process to be consultative, and having said that, clarifying before the Aptel that the lawyer will now go back to the commission to seek clarity from the members whether there can be a withdrawal altogether of the coupling order of 2024. This, in fact, is something that was acknowledged by the exchanges. The lawyers for the exchanges said that if that were to happen, then the entire process then just gets resolved. There is no cause for concern. Even, in fact, Aptel taking note of that and saying that if this clarity comes by Friday, which is later this week, if CERC says they're withdrawing this order, then this entire case will not survive. It'll be over in 5 minutes. So clearly all eyes now on the CERC and their decision on whether they choose to withdraw the coupling order.
All right, January 9th is when this matter will be taken up again. Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. Reliance Industries has denied a Bloomberg report which claimed that 3 vessels laden with Russian oil were heading to Jamnagar's refinery. Reliance called the report blatantly untrue. The company stated it has not received any cargo of Russian oil at its refinery in the past 3 weeks and is not expecting any Russian crude oil deliveries in January either. Now, India's services output has dropped to an 11-month low in December. This was due to a slow pickup in new businesses and hiring activity. HSBC's India Services PMI, compiled by S&P Global, fell to 58 in December. Remember, a reading above 50 indicates expansion, while a level below 50 signals contraction. The Reserve Bank of India has issued amendments to banks, NBFCs and other financial institutions on lending to related parties. This in a bid to tighten governance and transparency around these transactions. Under the amended directions, equity investments in related parties are excluded from the scope of these regulations. However, investments in debt instruments remain covered. The RBI has also exempt certain NBFCs from these guidelines. These amendments will come into effect from the 1st of April. Shares of Tata Motors passenger vehicles declined nearly 2% in trade. This after its luxury arm Jaguar Land Rover reported a sharp decline in wholesale and retail volumes for the third quarter of FY26. This was largely due to the impact of the cyber attack and the slowdown in production. Thereafter, JLR's wholesale numbers stood at 59,200 units, marking a steep annual decline of more than 43%. Retail sales came in at a reported 79,600 units, down 25% on an annual basis. India's competition watchdog, the CCI, has probed steel giants, including Tata Steel and JSW Steel, for breaching the antitrust law. As per Reuters report, CCI's investigation has found companies were colluding to fix steel prices. The report further states that CCI held 56 executives liable for price collusion between 2015 and 2023. CNBC TV 18 has tried to get a comment from the Competition Commission of India. We're still awaiting one. Time for us to head into a break, but up next, US President Trump doubles down on his threat to annex Greenland. That and more when we return. President Trump has doubled down on his territorial ambitions for Greenland, a Danish autonomous territory. Speaking at a conference, Trump said Washington needs Greenland for national security, cited its strategic Arctic location. Greenland's prime minister responded sharply, dismissing Trump's remarks as fantasy. Denmark's prime minister warned that a U.S. attack on a NATO ally like Denmark would mark the end of the alliance. Denmark's European allies affirmed that Greenland's future must be decided by its people. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said only Denmark and Greenland can determine the island's path. Trump's top aide Stephen Miller said that Greenland rightfully belonged to the U.S. and claimed that nobody would fight the U.S. militarily over the future of Greenland.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. Just say this. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And the European Union needs us to have it, and they know that.
If the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That is including our NATO and thus the security that has been provided since the end of the Second World War. I believe in democracy and I believe in the international rules. Of course, I also believe that you do not change borders by force either one way or another. It is not only the position of Denmark and the Danish kingdom, fortunately, of Europe too. So I hope that the people will also take note of the once again significant European support that we are receiving.
Now, Israeli forces have launched intense helicopter attacks on southern Gaza. At least 2 Palestinian officials have said that forces bombed a tent housing displaced Palestinians, killing a 5-year-old girl and her uncle. More than 400 Palestinians have died since the U.S. brokered truce came into effect last October. Ukraine has said that Russia carried out 5 missile strikes on its second biggest city of Kharkiv. Russian President Putin has also been accused of deliberately targeting a U.S. business in Ukraine. This comes as President Trump's senior negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are set to meet Ukrainian President Zelensky and Kyiv's European allies in Paris today to discuss the specifics of a peace deal. The United States Health Department has reduced the number of recommended vaccines for children. Ekta now joins us with the contours of the order. Ekta, take us through the vaccines that have been struck off the mandatory list.
In what is being called an unprecedented move, the US has reduced the number of vaccinations it recommends for children to 11 from 17 earlier. Now, under the new policy, vaccines for diseases such as measles, polio, HPV and chickenpox remain recommended for all children. However, vaccines for flu, rotavirus, COVID-19 and some hepatitis shots have been shifted to a shared clinical decision-making model between families and their healthcare providers or their doctors, indicating that those vaccines are now voluntary. The US has also reduced the HPV vaccine schedule to a single dose from the previously routine 2 to 3 doses. This move has sparked criticism on the lack of transparency and involvement in this decision. Critics also warn that the US has a much larger and more diverse population than countries such as Denmark, whose schedule was cited as a model for these changes, and that loosening universal recommendations could lead to lower vaccination rates and increase in preventable diseases such as flu, hepatitis and rotavirus. Now, going forward, experts estimate that the new schedule could possibly reduce the vaccine offtake by 30 to 40% over a period of time, a shift that will be key to monitor in the years ahead for its impact on diseases.
Ekta, many thanks. Senior Congress leader Sonia Gandhi admitted to Sir Gangaram Hospital last night after experiencing respiratory discomfort. The hospital said her bronchial asthma had been mildly aggravated due to the combined effects of cold weather and pollution. She was admitted for further observation and treatment as a precautionary measure and is currently stable. TMC MP Derek O'Brien has moved the Supreme Court challenging the special intensive revision of electoral rolls in West Bengal. The plea asked the apex court to stay the finalization of electoral rolls on the 14th of February. The petition has alleged that 58 lakh voters were removed from the draft rolls without notice. It also claims that the removals were arbitrary and violated procedures. Former Union Minister and Congress leader Suresh Kalmadi passed away at the age of 81 after a prolonged illness. He served as Union Minister of State for Railways and was the former president of the Indian Olympic Association. Leaders across parties have expressed their condolence. Mahindra has launched the new XUV XO starting from 13.6 lakh rupees. Bookings for the XUV 700 successor will open on the 14th of January with deliveries beginning the same day for higher variants. Shivani brings us the latest on Mahindra's new offering.
Well, this is the all-new XUV 7XO from Mahindra & Mahindra. I am here in Jaisalmer where Mahindra has just unveiled this premium SUV, the 7XO, which is the successor of the XUV 700. Now, starting at 13.66 lakh rupees, the XUV 7XO builds on the success of the XUV 700 and brings in several segment-first features, including the world's first Da Vinci suspension system, India's first ICE software-defined vehicle, and a coast-to-coast triple-screen layout. Let me just show you. This is the triple-screen layout here, as you can see, and this, by the way, is across variants. The model also comes equipped with level 2 ADAS with dynamic visualization, underlying Mahindra's intent to mainstream high-end technology. From a business strategy perspective, Mahindra says it will calibrate production based on the demand visibility, but expectations are that the interest in the XUV 7XO could be as strong as the 700 saw at the launch.
Well, that's the latest there from Mahindra. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a minute with more.